and welcome to episode 18 of the Instruction Booklet. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'm joined always by a man who asked the important question of, if they've got the Dragon Balls, why haven't they resurrected Bardock and King Vegeta yet? It's my co-host, Michael. Michael, how's it going?
It's funny you say that because I saw a post about that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think in the future we might see something like that happen with Bardock, because Bardock was referenced in the latest Super arc per the manga.
Yeah, with like the heaters.
Right. The thing you have to remember is like Goku doesn't really remember his dad. Right? Like it's probably not even something that would have crossed his mind to resurrect Bardock at any point using the Dragon Balls. That, and I think he has a precedent that his brother was evil, and so maybe he thinks it would be best to. Obviously these things are, it's just the answer is Toriyama, rest in peace, never wrote it, and Toyotaro might not even be thinking about it. Is the real answer.
I just tend to point to the fact that it's taken. How many times have they used the Dragon Balls and they still haven't resurrected King Kai?
Yeah.
To the point that it's just a running gag at this point.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Just, make sure King Kai never dies again and they never have to deal with it narratively.
Yeah. So, anyway, so we're back from our previous episode. We had to skip because there's been some stuff going on, but hey, we're back in action, and today we're going to talk about some fun stuff. But first, as always, Michael, what you been up to lately? What you been playing? What games you've been playing? What books you've been reading? Media you've been ingesting?
Yeah, my semester has been quite busy, so that's largely what's been taking up a lot of my time as of late. But I have been really enjoying the Bazaar over the past month. For those of you who are not in the know, there was a former, I know him as a Hearthstone player, Raynad, who, played a lot of Hearthstone. He was a streamer. I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, he left Hearthstone to start working on his own, at the time, card game called The Bazaar. And I pretty much remember it being memed into oblivion when this first started happening, because I'm pretty sure nobody expected Raynad to actually make a successful game that would do well alongside, Hearthstone. Because at the time, Hearthstone was one of, I think, maybe the only realistic digital card game in the online space. That was like before Magic the Gathering Online. That was before Legends of Runeterra.
Yeah. Hearthstone was kind of like the first digital card game. Right.
Now, we're sort of in a digital card game economy these days where I think a lot of people are open to alternatives, Magic, Hearthstone, Marvel Snap, for those who are playing it, the Pokemon game.
Yeah, TCG Pocket's been real popular.
Yeah. So finally, the Bazaar came out, and Raynad sort of shifted it, I think, away from being a deck builder, card collection style game to actually being more of an auto battler. Which I like, actually, because honestly, if I ever play Hearthstone these days, it's just Battlegrounds anyway.
Yeah, same.
And the Bazaar, it's finally in closed beta currently. It'll be in open beta, I think, in January, and then released shortly after. But it's really addicting, and I think it's been a largely successful beta. The game has been plagued with balance issues, of course, but the dev team has been very quick. We don't go more than a week or two without patches or balance hotfixes that address some of the more problematic elements of the game. And they're doing a very good job making their patches swing for the fences in terms of how radically they're transforming the balance of the game from week to week, which I think is a good idea for a beta. They're really kind of stress testing what feels healthy for the game.
Yeah.
So that's my Bazaar plug for those of you who don't know. If you like roguelites or auto battlers, I do recommend checking it out.
Sweet.
Other than that, I started playing Silent Hill 2.
Okay, so the remake, not the original.
No, I've never played the original, but I'm really, really enjoying the remake. I finished Metaphor Refantasio earlier this month and thought it was really good.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but like amazing things about that game.
Yeah, it's quite frankly amazing, and the soundtrack is superb as well.
Sweet.
And yeah, I think that's about it for me. What about you?
I've really been. I got the Battlegrounds bug, the Hearthstone Battlegrounds bug, pretty bad. Yep. So I played a lot of that. In between, I have. Let's see. I downloaded. I haven't played it yet. I downloaded the DLC for Blasphemous 2. I need to get back to playing that because I really enjoyed like both of those games because both of them are very different.
Yeah.
I bought another Crab's Treasure and started playing it. So that's been kind of hilarious. The game's very tongue in cheek. It has an entire area called the Sands Between, which is kind of poking fun at Elden Ring.
Sure.
So I've been playing that. Let's see. I got Pokemon TCG Pocket and got into that. That's been a fun. I like low effort card collecting games where I can just like open packs and just kind of the emphasis is on collecting the cards and not really like on PvP stuff, which is that sounds like Pokemon in a nutshell. You know,
that makes sense.
They like to focus more on like collecting all the little monsters than they do like battling them. In terms of reading, man, I chewed through a lot of stuff recently. I read a graphic novel called Beneath the Trees Where No One Sees. It's about like an anthropomorphic like town that has like a serial killer who doesn't kill people in the town. But like goes out into the city to like kill people and then buries them, and then eventually one day there's a murder in the town. There was another one I read by Ram V called it's like I think it was called like Rare Flavors. It was really neat. It's about like a Rakshasa who eats people and like teaching this person about all of these like delicacies of like actual food. It was very good. It was very colorful as well. And then I read a book called Slade House, which is from the same author that wrote Life of Pi. It's like cool. It's like a weird like horror like anthology book that was pretty cool. And then currently I am reading a book called Dungeon Crawler Carl. That is like it reads almost like Hitchhikers, like in terms of like just the funniness, but like basically a guy and his ex-girlfriend's cat. One day, all of the buildings and structures on the planet get flattened and like 3 million people die in an instant. But this intergalactic organization turns the entire planet into a giant dungeon and he has to survive. So I'm about 100 pages into that. It's been pretty good.
I forgot. I just remembered.
Yeah.
Arcane season 2.
That
came out. I watched it. It's really good.
Sweet.
I like it. As somebody who played League of Legends all the way back in season 2 and has been on board for pretty much all of the major weird lore retcons that they've done over the years. It makes me happy to see the world of League of Legends and the lore, which is genuinely quite interesting, get finally treated with a certain level of nuance and maturity that I think has been some of the best like speculative fiction media that I've seen in recent memory.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think it's really good. I recommend it. I don't even play League of Legends anymore, so
nice. I only played League for like 2 months, so
yeah.
What else have I? I watched for somebody who's talking about like Netflix stuff. I had never seen it. I finally watched all of it. I sat down and watched all of Cyberpunk Edge Runners.
Nice.
That show was very pretty and really depressing.
Yes.
And I started watching Batman Caped Crusader.
I've heard good things.
Yeah, I'm about 6 episodes into it. There's a lot of changes, but I think they're all for the better. I think it makes it a really unique series. I think like just like we were talking before we recorded, like there's been a nice like resurgence with like really good DC animation lately. Like we were talking about My Adventures with Superman. Just like good quality like DC stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know what comes out tomorrow? Not for the viewers, but for us.
What's that?
As we're recording this, Creature Commandos.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
And yeah, apparently it's good, which, you know, I think is to be expected because James Gunn, I don't think has missed yet as far as his superhero stuff is concerned.
Yeah, all the Guardians movies were really good.
Yep. Peacemakers, Suicide Squad.
Yeah, so that's okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just what he has in store for us with like DC stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited for his Superman.
So yeah, same. So yeah, it's I've been like anime, been watching Dan to Dan, and the trailer for the new Gundam series just came out, which looks really interesting.
I've heard it's bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It looks interesting because like they got the Pokemon anime designer to do all the character designs, and they got the original Neon Genesis Evangelion writer to do this show. So I'm ready to be hurt. So
guess we'll see.
The Gundam reminds me a lot of like Gurren Lagann, like in terms of like mech design. So,
well, maybe it'll be good. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, so now that we've talked about that, our little fun news section that we added in recently is talking about news that's happened recently. With the one at the very top of our news section is the one that has me like most like, is Sony looking to buy From Software's parent company.
I did see that. Yes.
That I don't know how to feel about that.
I think on a broader level, it's probably a bad thing. Because I'm anti the monopolization of the game industry that's sort of happened over the past console cycle or two. Microsoft has been trying to buy up a lot of companies. I feel like we've gotten to a point where, development and technology and game design is kind of hitting diminishing returns. The jump between last console and this console generation has been maybe the smallest yet, as far as graphics are concerned. I guess maybe not in terms of computing power generally, but it sort of alarms me to see that the console wars might just come down to, these days, whichever company can buy up the most developers.
Yeah.
That being said, if there is ever a chance that Bloodborne 2 or a Bloodborne remake or a Bloodborne remaster happens and I can get it on PC and it's 60 frames per second, I would literally I would sell my soul for that.
I mean, yeah, I know everybody lost their minds this week when that 30th anniversary trailer dropped and it ends on Bloodborne, and everybody was like, "Oh God, is it a new thing?" And a bunch of people were like, "No, it's from an old commercial."
Right.
Like the bar is so low for a Bloodborne 60 FPS that it's just hilarious.
I think it's just like it shows people too that Sony, I guess, hasn't forgotten that Bloodborne exists. Like somebody over at Sony offices is aware that Bloodborne is a game that existed in the past at one point.
Yeah,
and I think that it excites people because it shows that Sony understands how much people love the intellectual property, which I guess in their minds means they have to be paying attention to how much people want something else.
I mean, you have to think this year the Bloodborne spinoff cart game came out for free and sold like, and the downloads on it was like insane.
Right.
So
it is a sitting pile of cash. I mean, whoever is in charge of making this decision has to be absolutely insane. That or they're sitting on the best kept secret in the gaming industry.
Oh yeah. One day Sony's going to need a lot of money and they're just going to be like, re-release Bloodborne.
Right. Emergency Bloodborne button. They had it with, their emergency button in the past was Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yep.
And now it's going to be Bloodborne.
Yeah.
So I'm holding out hope. But.
Yeah. Our next piece of news, and this is the one that will also probably get touched on when we do our award show because we like shitting on them, is the Game Awards got announced. And there's been some controversy already. The fact that the Game of the Year awards features a remake as well as a DLC. That DLC being Shadow of the Erd Tree.
Yeah.
And people were pretty upset about it.
I have conflicted feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, I do feel like Shadow of the Erd Tree is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably one of the best gaming experiences I've had all year. The soundtrack actually finally just came out on Spotify, and so I've been listening through it because I'm always looking to find new music for my D&D pod or my Spotify playlist.
It feels like a separate. It feels like the natural evolution of From Software's combat.
Right. It was enough content to be its own game. It was amazing. I mean, some of the best content I think in Elden Ring was in Shadow of the Erd Tree.
Hardest boss they ever made.
Yeah, definitely. But nevertheless, Elden Ring did not come out this year, and it already won Game of the Year the year that it came out.
Oh yeah.
And so part of me feels like Shadow of the Erd Tree perhaps should have been acknowledged in some other category, like maybe. Is there a best category for like best DLC expansion? Because
there is not.
It seems like that should be something that exists.
Yeah, because apparently there's been a lot of other really great DLCs that came out this year.
Yeah.
So, and then, with Final Fantasy VII, whatever the second part of the remake is, people were like, because it's also like, there's a part where Silent Hill 2 remake is like taking over another category, and they're like, you could literally just make a category for like best remake. Because we're entering this phase now where like remakes, remasters are pretty dominant.
They are. I think I feel differently about the remakes and the remasters because I do feel like a lot of intentional decision making has had to go into the details.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you go back and play Final Fantasy VII versus Rebirth, either the first or the second, they're so different.
I used to be on the fence. Like, I was so angry for the longest time when they did the remake. Like, I used to just be like, I was so mad about it because just the cost, like the price point. So, but then I watched a Let's Play of Final Fantasy VII remake, and I was like, oh, this isn't actually a remake. Like, if anything, as like someone like friend of the show Adam Pickens told me was it should be like make because I guess spoilers, it diverges from the original storyline.
Yeah.
So, and it plays with the ideas of like modifying your perceptions on what you thought was going to happen. So
right. It's more like a Final Fantasy VII adaptation.
It's almost a sequel. Like So
I have no problem with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth getting nominated.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think Shadow of the Erd Tree is a little bit strange. I'm personally pulling for metaphor, but
yeah, I think
I do feel weird about that.
I was very shocked to see Balatro on there, though.
Yeah, that's kind of a meme. Like, I know people like Balatro, but I
do.
Game of the Year. Like,
I think the game is solid, but I don't know if it's like Game of the Year quality. So
yeah.
Yeah. So the last part, and this kind of bleeds into our episode, is the Nintendo Power lawsuit has become a little bigger. For those that don't know, Power World was a game that came out last year. That's basically Pokemon with guns and crafting, and it caught a lot of attention. A lot of people got really upset about it. But Nintendo kind of stayed quiet for a while, and everybody thought Nintendo and Game Freaks were going to kind of do something, but then nothing ever really came of it until this year when Nintendo filed a patent right before Power World came out that basically explicitly stated like throwing a spherical object in a 3D space to capture creatures. And now they are suing Power World in Japanese court for patent infringement, which is stupid.
It's stupid. I mean, like, legally, they might be in the right technically, but I think we can all agree that it's stupid.
Yeah, and if Pocket Pair settles, it's going to set a really bad precedent.
Yeah.
So
I'm reminded of, I believe we talked about the lawsuit surrounding like all of the Pong ripoffs that happened in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded that the criteria by which I think Magnavox was suing everyone was that they had patented the idea of controlling a moving pixelated figure that could come into contact with a pixel and thus like change the direction of the pixel that it was traveling in, to go in a different direction.
Yeah, like it's dumb.
Something incredibly broad.
Yeah. Vague enough that you could make some legal claims on it.
Right. To my understanding, Nintendo specifically is trying to make a case that Pal World has done something, too similar to the Pokeball, and that, in that way they are infringing on their intellectual property, I guess. But if the wording really is as broad as like you throw an object to catch a creature in a 3-dimensional space, that would be messed up.
What's crazy is Pocket Pair had a game prior to Pal World called Craftopia that already does just that. And Nintendo filed this patent after that game had already been out. Yeah. So
then, perhaps they can get it dismissed on the grounds of, Nintendo tried to.
Nintendo's basically going to try and tie Pocket Pair up in legal fees, and basically they're trying to strong arm them out. And I hope Pocket Pair just like stands their ground and, shoves it back down Nintendo's throat. So,
I think that would be good. I think Pal World is derivative. I don't care for the game at all.
It's not my flavor. I think it's funny, some of the memes I've seen out of it, but like, yeah.
I also am just not terribly fond of the way Nintendo will legally bully smaller studios and individual, developers like who make fan games and stuff.
Yeah, it's okay. They're probably going to take this episode down if we talk too bad about them.
Well, we're not infringing their copyright unless you start playing Pokemon music.
Yeah, that's true. So, well, anyways, talking about Nintendo, that's what we're talking about today.
Woohoo.
Today we're going to go over the history of Nintendo, actually, because as this is our last part of the video game crash episodes, because Lord, we've been here with what feels like forever.
Indeed.
Nintendo is very much a big part of how we get out of the video game crash. So today in our overview, we're going to kind of go over Nintendo as how they started. Apparently, they made playing cards. We're going to talk about how they started branching out into electronics from their early beginnings as toy manufacturer. We're going to talk about the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System and coming out of the video game crash. And then we're going to kind of wrap things up by talking about like where Nintendo went towards the future and how they kind of became synonymous with video games, despite some of their really crappy practices. So as a brief early history, Nintendo was founded as Nintendo Kompai on the 23rd of September, 1889 by craftsman Fushijiro Yamauchi in Shimigoku, Kyoto, Japan, as an unincorporated establishment to produce and distribute Japanese playing cards, or karura, which is a Japanese and Portuguese carta card, most notably hatafuda, which were flower cards. The name Nintendo is commonly assumed to mean leave luck to heaven, but assumptions lack historical validation, and it's also been suggested to mean the temple of free hatafuda. And even the descendants of Yamauchi do not know the true intention of the meaning of the name. As a fun historical context for everybody, Japan banned gambling. So hatafuda kind of became the de facto like card game in Japan for a while. Even to where we had like back alley stuff for like maybe some Yakuza connections, but not in like the terms that you may think of. I think you looked up something the other day that was said that like it didn't mean what we associate Yakuza with now.
Well, apparently the name Yakuza has its origins in here, I'll actually, I have. So it's this article from the Tech Times written by Ben McCool about Nintendo's history. And he writes that the original meaning of the Japanese word Yakuza was quote unquote useless individuals, a term first coined to a losing hand played in Hanafuda.
Okay.
So it's interesting that Nintendo perhaps got their start making cards for the game where the Yakuza got their name from. That's
really even more hilarious.
So Yakuza is a Nintendo game, basically.
Yeah. Eat it, Sega.
Lawsuit incoming.
Yeah, you've infringed on something there. So in 1959, Nintendo moved its headquarters, and the company entered into a partnership with the Walt Disney Corporation to incorporate its characters into playing cards, which opened it up to a children's market and resulted in a boost in Nintendo's playing card business. By 1961, the company had established a Tokyo branch in Chiyoda, Tokyo, and sold more than 1.5 million card packs, holding a high market stake for which it relied on television advertising campaigns. In 1962, Nintendo became a public company by listing stock on the second section of the Osaka Securities Exchange and the Kyoto Stock Exchange. And in the following year, the company adopted its current name, Nintendo & Co. Ltd., and started manufacturing games in addition to playing cards. So, as a humble beginnings, just by making playing cards and then landing a very good deal with the Walt Disney Company, Nintendo kind of blew up kind of early. And they made some more interesting things, which I think Michael has some info on.
It was very interesting for me, kind of looking back at the early history of Nintendo, because I think a lot of people at this point are aware of their history as playing card developers. I kind of knew that, and so I guess my presumption was Nintendo was always just kind of in the business of games primarily. But apparently they really took some creative risks in the 1960s with some of their investments. Again, per Ben McCool for the Tech Times in this article, Nintendo's Strange History, McCool writes that after securing a licensing deal with Disney in the early 1960s, the company injected its freshly bolstered cash flow into a series of new ventures. Failed business expansions included, but weren't restricted to, baby swings, ballpoint pens, instant rice, and Lego-like blocks. And somewhat ironically, for what we've been talking about, the latter apparently landed Nintendo with a lawsuit with the actual Lego accusing the Japanese jack-of-all-trades of copyright infringement. The legal battle was dismissed due to Nintendo's quote-unquote NNB blocks, including different shaped sizes or components.
That's hilarious.
In addition to these things, Nintendo tried and failed to set up a taxi company, but apparently was thwarted because of problems with labor unions. And in one of their more questionable and perhaps infamous decisions as far as their business ventures were concerned, Nintendo set up love hotels, or at least a love hotel. I'm not sure if they had more than one. Which I will let Ben McCool's words and description of the Love Hotel speak for itself. Clients didn't tend to get much in the way of rest, let alone sleep. Rooms were available to rent by the hour, with patrons typically accompanied by guests of the financially compensated variety. So needless to say, Nintendo was perhaps not always the family-friendly company that we know them to be today.
Man, where's that callback in games today?
Right. When am I going to get the Love Hotel DLC for Tears of the Kingdom?
or
for Mario Odyssey.
Mario Odyssey goes to Love Hotel Land.
Right. Or Luigi's Mansion 4 needs to take place in a defunct Nintendo Love Hotel.
That would be, man. I mean, I could see Luigi just like rolling up his like, it's like this is different.
Yeah. So that all is to say, before Nintendo, after Nintendo, had been making cards for many years, and before Nintendo really kind of established itself as a juggernaut of the early gaming industry, they did some exploration, some self-discovery.
Yeah, they did a study abroad.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, so after some of these odds and ends things that they've attempted, so in the 1970s, the company's stock listing was promoted to the first section of the Osaka Stock Exchange, and the reconstruction and enlargement of its corporate headquarters was completed. The year represented a watershed moment in Nintendo's history as it released Japan's first electronic toy, the beam gun, an optoelectronic pistol. In total, more than 1 million units were sold, and Nintendo partnered with a company known as Magnavox to provide a light gun controller based on the beam gun design for the company's new home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, in 1971. Other popular toys that were released during this time were the Ultra Hand, the Ultra Machine, the Ultra Scope, and the Love Tester, with more than 1.2 million units of the Ultra Hand were sold in Japan. So, kind of interesting that another video game company that we find synonymous with early gaming of the Magnavox Odyssey was pairing up with Nintendo prior to Nintendo's entry into the actual video game market.
Mm-hmm. It sort of makes sense why they were in a good position, to help rebound the industry in the 80s, because, they had already kind of established themselves and made good connections beforehand as far as distribution and development was concerned.
Yeah, it's them quietly just sitting back and watching.
Right. I took an interest in some of these toys that you mentioned, as far as I was really curious to see what some of Nintendo's early toys looked like before they started doing, actual electronics and video games. And so I pulled up the Wikipedias for the ones that I could find for the Ultra Hand and the Ultra Machine. The Ultra Scope, I actually had to find some blog post about it because there's not even a Wikipedia page for it.
Yeah.
And the Love Tester.
The Love Tester.
So most of these were developed by a employee at Nintendo, Gunpei Yokoi, who, from what I have read, had kind of a knack for developing trinkets and doodads, and he sort of landed a kind of developmental position early on in the 1960s for Nintendo as far as making their early toys. He I think, later goes on to make Game & Watch, which I'm sure you'll mention later. Mm-hmm. But so the Ultra Hand is a toy that is basically just I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it. Like an accordion, how it's got things that move back and forth from left to right.
Yeah.
You hold two handles and you squeeze them together, and it extends an arm that's like a grabber arm.
Oh, so it's like a claw grabber that you might use.
Yeah. The Wikipedia describes it as the Ultra Hand consists of several crisscross connected plastic elements and operates like the lazy tongs pantograph principle. One end of the Ultra Hand has scissor-like handles and is operated like scissors, extending when the handles are pinched together and retracting when they are parted.
Okay.
It's a very basic toy. But what's been funny to me, actually, when I was looking into the Ultra Hand is how much it kind of gets, alluded back to in Nintendo's history. Mm-hmm. There's an ability called Ultra Hand in Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is supposedly named directly after that toy.
Yeah, it allows you to actually pick objects up and move them around.
Yeah. Apparently there was a WiiWare game titled Grill Off with Ultra Hand that was released in 2010 for Nintendo Club members. So it's funny, Nintendo seems fond of acknowledging their past in this kind of way.
Except for their Love Hotels.
Except for the Love Hotels, yeah. In addition to the Ultra Hand, there was a series like the Ultra toy series. There was an Ultra Machine, which is, it's just a softball launcher. It's kind of just like a weird toy in the trio because it's literally just a batting toy.
Oh.
It launches softballs and you have a bat and you hit them. So that's a thing. Apparently, the Ultra Machine appears as a boss fight in WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro Games and WarioWare Smooth Moves as a minigame.
Okay.
Also in Mario Party 5 and Animal Crossing New Leaf as a piece of furniture.
Well, and I
So-
think the Nintendo Museum has like batting cages.
Yeah, they've got Ultra machines set up for people to use them. The Ultra Scope, which I think is the most bizarre toy in their Ultra line, it's like, I don't know how to describe it other than, if you've ever seen like those submarine telescopes where like you're looking through it and there's two handles on either side and it goes up and it uses mirrors to reflect the light so you can kind of see above you.
Yeah, it's like a periscope.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for, I guess. It is just, it's just that. It's weird. I mean,
yeah, and it has like battery operation that like it raises and lowers.
Yeah, I found a blog post talking about it on beforemario.com. Actually, don't know who wrote this.
I'll make sure to link these in the notes too, so that way people can look this up.
Yeah, it's just so bizarre. Like, I can't imagine there being any thematic consistency between the Ultra Hand, the Ultra Machine, and the Ultra Scope.
What? Don't you want to get an Ultra Scope for Christmas?
Yeah. And then somehow, maybe the weirdest toy that they did was the Love Tester, which, according to the Wikipedia, designed for young ladies and men, the device tries to determine how much two people love each other. To operate the device, both users grab one of the connected spherical metal sensors with one hand and hold each other's hands with the other. Or hold each other's hands with the other. That is what the Wikipedia says. The meter on the device displays their love score on a scale between 1 and 100.
Wow.
I just don't understand what they were thinking. And naturally, of course, the Love Tester is featured as a doodad in WarioWare Twisted. And it apparently also shows up in Pikmin 2, as well as Animal Crossing New Leaf as an Easter egg.
I wonder how many marriages it has ended.
Yeah.
Sorry, honey. We're getting a divorce. The Love Tester says we're a 4.
Right. The Nintendo Love Tester failed us.
Yeah. Why go to marriage counseling when we can just use the Nintendo Love Tester?
Yeah. So there's actually a quote from Gunpei Yokoi on the Love Tester Wikipedia that says, quote, "The Love Tester came from me, wondering if I could somehow use this to get girls to hold my hand. I wound up holding hands with quite a few girls thanks to it. Of course, somewhere along the line, I started to feel like I wanted to do more than just hold hands," laughs, end quote.
I wish we could actually have better context to tell if this is like satire or it feels like being serious.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, between this and what was it, Pac-Man, I feel like I'm learning a lot about how, weird guys developed toys in early video games based on their sense of like how to get girls or what girls would be interested in.
Yeah. It's clearly we needed more women in game development during this time.
Right. Otherwise, we're going to get more Love Testers and Pac-Man.
Yeah. Here, darling, hold my Ultra Hand to see if we're compatible.
Right.
Oh, we're not. I guess I'll go to this love hotel.
Yeah. Nintendo had a little something for everyone.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. I like to imagine that they had Love Testers set up in the rooms of the Love Hotels.
Yeah, that way you can make sure you're compatible with whoever you met at the Love Hotel.
Exactly.
So
anyway, their early toys were interesting.
Yeah. So moving on with the growing demand of Nintendo's products led to the further expansion of their offices, for which they acquired the surrounding land and assigned the production of cards to the original Nintendo building. Meanwhile, they continued to develop innovative products for the company. The laser clay shooting system was released in 1973 and managed to surpass bowling in popularity, which interesting to realize that Japan really liked bowling in the 1970s. And as a nice, fun callback, clay shooting is one of the 3 games that's on Duck Hunt. Though Nintendo's toys continued to gain popularity, a 1973 oil crisis caused both a spike in cost of plastics and a change in consumer priorities that put essential products over pastimes. And Nintendo lost several billion yen. So Nintendo almost kind of experienced their own little miniature crash. but it wouldn't really keep them down for very long. In 1974, Nintendo released Wild Gunman, a skeet shooting arcade simulator consisting of a 16 millimeter image projector with a sensor that detected a beam from the player's light gun. Both the laser clay shooting system and Wild Gunman were successfully exported to Europe and North America. However, Nintendo's production speeds were still slowed compared to the rival companies such as Bandai and Tommy, and their prices were high, which led to the discontinuation of some of their light gun products. The subsidiary Nintendo Leisure System Company Ltd., which developed these products, was closed as a result of the economic impact dealt by the oil crisis. So I'm sure that was probably the end of the Ultra line as well as the Love Machine.
Yeah.
Interesting that they have these all these light gun games, which eventually would kind of become a staple of the early like Nintendo with like Duck Hunt, and then like in the Super Nintendo era with like the Super Scope.
Right.
So, and then you think about like arcade cabinets with like that were like light gun games, like Area 51 or like Time Crisis and stuff. So motivated by the successes of Atari and Magnavox with their video game consoles, Nintendo acquired the Japanese distribution rights for the Magnavox Odyssey in 1974 and reached an agreement with the Mitsubishi Electric to develop similar products between 1975 and 1978, including the first microprocessors for video game systems, the Color TV game series, and an arcade game inspired by Othello. During this point, they developed the video game EVR Race, and Shigeru Miyamoto joined the company with the responsibilities of designing the casings for the Color TV consoles. And in 1978, Nintendo's research and development department was split into two facilities, Nintendo Research and Development 1 and Nintendo Research and Development 2. So, you know, in the mid-70s, Shigeru Miyamoto would finally join the company, and his impact is kind of important.
Yeah. He did a couple of things at Nintendo.
Yeah, and the Color TV game series is actually like pretty popular. I think it even shows up in one of my books that I have about like the history of video game consoles.
Yeah,
so
we've talked about it before too.
Mm-hmm. And then even to this day, we still have Nintendo R&D 1, 2, and I think there's now R&D 3. So, which is usually how Nintendo develops a lot of its products nowadays.
Sure.
So when Shigeru Miyamoto brought distinctive sources of inspiration to the company, ranging from a natural environment and regional culture of Sonobe, the popular culture influences like westerns and detective films, and the folk Shinto practices and family media. These would each be seen in the most of Nintendo's major franchises, which developed following Miyamoto's creative leadership. So then we finally reached the kind of like key points here, which is with two key events in Nintendo's history occurring in 1979. Its American subsidiary was opened in New York City, and a new department focused on arcade games was created. In the 1980s, one of the first handheld video game systems, the Game & Watch, was created by Yokoi from the technology used in portable calculators. It became one of Nintendo's most successful products, with over 43.4 million units sold worldwide during its production period, and for which 59 games were made in total.
So everyone keep in mind that the man who invented Game & Watch invented the love tester so he could get laid. Yeah.
Ladies gotta love Mr. Game & Watch.
Yep. And so every time you play Game & Watch and Smash, just remember the legacy of your character.
Yes. He's not really trying to like actually grab you to throw you off the stage. He's trying to grab you to make sure you're compatible with his love.
He's trying to smash.
Or he's trying to smash, yeah.
Yeah.
So Nintendo entered the arcade video game market with Sheriff and Radar Scope, released in Japan in 1979 and 1980, respectively. Sheriff, also known as Bandino in some regions, marked the first original video game made by Nintendo. So there you go. It wasn't Donkey Kong. It wasn't Mario. It was a game known as Sheriff. And this game was published by Sega and developed by Genko Takada and Shigeru Miyamoto. So here's kind of a fun little moment right here of Nintendo and Sega working together, which is going to become a little bit more complicated as the years go on. Radarscope rivaled Galaxian in Japanese arcades, but failed to find an audience overseas and created a financial crisis for the company. To try and find a more successful game, they put Miyamoto in charge of their next arcade game design, leading to the release of Donkey Kong in 1981, one of the first platform video games that allowed the player character to jump. The character Jumpman would later become Mario and Nintendo's official mascot. Mario was named after Mario Segale, the landlord of Nintendo's offices in Tukwila, Washington. Donkey Kong was a financial success for Nintendo in both Japan and overseas, and led Coleco to fight Atari for licensing rights for porting to home consoles and personal computers. So yeah, Nintendo coming in at the beginning of the 80s with the arcade release of Donkey Kong and just kind of being very successful in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early 1980s, several video game consoles proliferated in the United States, as well as low-quality games production and third-party developers, which oversaturated the market and led to the video game crash of 1983. Consequently, a recession hit the American video game industry, whose revenue went from $3 billion to $100 million between 1983 and 1985. Nintendo's initiative to launch the Famicom, though, in America was also impacted. To differentiate the Famicom from its competitors in America, Nintendo rebranded it as the Entertainment System and its cartridges as game packs, with a design reminiscent of VCR. Nintendo implemented a lockout chip in the game packs for controls of its third-party library to avoid the market saturation that occurred in the United States. The result is the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, which was released in North America in 1985. With landmark games as Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, which was produced by Miyamoto and Takashiki Suzuki. Composer Koji Kondo reinforced the idea that musical themes could act as complement to the game mechanics rather than simply a miscellaneous element. Production of the NES lasted until 1995, and the production of the Famicom, which was the Japanese equivalent, lasted until 2003, which is wild to think about. Like, the fact that the NES was still in production in like the early 2000s, or the Famicom was still in production.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember, I mean, I had an NES growing up, but you know, I was born in 96. I'm aging myself. I'm dating myself here for all of the listeners at home.
That's fine. So, I mean, I was born the year after the NES came out. So, and I had an NES in my house. In fact, my original NES is sitting like a couple of feet away from me.
Yeah.
Like, still works to this day.
Not sure.
In total, 62 million Famicom and NES consoles were sold worldwide. During this period, Nintendo created a copyright infringement protection in the form of the official Nintendo Seal of Quality, added to their products so that customers may recognize their authenticity and market. By this time, Nintendo's network of electronic suppliers had extended to around 30 companies, including Ricoh, Nintendo's main source of semiconductors, and the Sharp Corporation. So
I remember the Seal.
Yeah,
game
like
covers and stuff.
So it's almost kind of like what you were mentioning earlier, Michael, where it's like Nintendo actually kind of sat back and watched as like things were happening while like quietly like testing the waters until finally, you know, this crash comes in, like basically wipes out everything in America. And they just kind of, they've already been putting the Famicom out in Japan with success because, as we mentioned in previous episodes, Japan didn't really suffer the same effects of the crashes like the US did.
Right. And now Jeremy, if the listeners at home wanted to learn more about the video game market crash of the 1980s, where can they go? I
mean, they can just go listen to our previous episodes.
Exactly.
On the
shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug for ourselves.
Yeah,
we would totally never do such things.
Anyway,
so it's interesting to me to see that like this company that went from making card games to making love testers and ultra hands and ultra scopes, like use this opportunity. They were very much in the right place at the right time. So,
right.
And I mean, it's interesting because like, as we talked about when we originally discussed like the video game crash, Like, everybody was like, oh, it was this problem, or oh, it was this that like was the main cause of the crash. And as we've covered previously, which y'all can all go listen to, it's a very complicated reasoning, but it's kind of hard not to say Nintendo pulled the video games in the US market out of that.
Yeah.
Because like they were the people. Like they looked at all of the lessons that were to be taught from this crash, like adding their own game packs, putting proprietary chips, quality control, and releasing a really solid product that they were able to just to dominate the market. And even still today, like I think today they're probably still not, they're not as like large as sizable as they were back then. They are still very much a force to be reckoned with today. But market diversification has occurred. Now you have Sony and Microsoft are in the same space.
Yeah, I think something that Nintendo has done that's very smart is they've found a niche for themselves. And, so they're not even really competing that much with Microsoft and Sony. Like Nintendo has Nintendo games. And if you want to play, Animal Crossing or Mario Party, it's like, or Legend of Zelda, right? You know where you're going, right? You're buying a Nintendo console. You're not really buying something else.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess people are trying to, do stuff like Pal World now, but I think also Nintendo has remained consistently pretty high quality in terms of their releases. I mean, every time a new Mario game comes out, it's usually quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Every time a new Zelda game comes out, it's like one of the best in the franchise. I do think it's relevant, actually, and it's funny because there's been a lot of... I've seen gaming news outlets talking about how 2024 has kind of signaled the bursting of the AAA games bubble in kind of the modern gaming era, as we've seen over and over again, like high-profile releases from major studios just completely tank.
Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting that Nintendo has managed to, I think, remain pretty consistent throughout its career in terms of its attention to quality.
Yeah, and I would even say to the point that, like, even with this generation with the Switch, Nintendo has taken time to, like, make the Switch available enough to port all of the really great indie games. So that, like, the Switch is almost like a really great place for, like, oh, if you don't have like access to a PC that's like with enough to like play some of these like really great indie games, just wait a couple of months and they'll port it over to the Switch.
Right. If you want to play Hades, wait until,
Yeah.
Switch.
I mean, that's how I played Dave the Diver.
Yeah.
So, and I've played like tons of other like really good, like that's how I have Blasphemous on my Switch. And like Nintendo, they had some stumbles here and there. Like, the GameCube wasn't a big success, and the Wii U also kind of suffered.
The Wii U, the controller, I think I really just blame.
I also think the marketing for the Wii U kind of like shot it in the foot because like they didn't name it something different.
Yeah.
So,
I remember for a while, I think the working name was the Nintendo Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing that back in a while, and then the Wii U, which was just like...
I mean, and then you look at the success of like the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, and then the SD, and then you had the 3DS, and now that's all kind of merged into the Switch.
Yeah.
So...
It makes sense. 3DS was a really good handheld.
I mean, I still have my original Game Boy, and I played the hell out of that thing.
I remember some people, I think, talking about how the branding behind the Wii U kind of killed it because people were confused about which console to buy between the Wii or the Wii U.
Yeah, they didn't realize that it was a new console. They thought it was just like an addition.
Right.
So.
And it's kind of, I've heard people saying similar things about the recent Microsoft consoles because, you had the Xbox 360 and then the Xbox One, and then you had the Xbox One X and the Xbox One S.
Yeah, it's really confusing.
And then you have the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X.
Yeah.
you know, like you could have just called it like the Xbox 2, you know, or the Xbox 740 or whatever the hell, like 720.
Meanwhile, somebody just slaps a new number up there.
Right.
And then just completely revamps the entire look of the console.
Yeah.
Speaking of PlayStation, to add this one little tiny piece of fun information onto this Nintendo story that I think people will find entertaining is this little blurb I found about Sony and Nintendo. Until 1991, Sony had little direct involvement with the video game industry. The companies supplied components for other consoles, such as a sound chip for the Super Famicom or the SNES from Nintendo, and operated a video game studio called Sony ImageSoft. As a part of a joint project between Nintendo and Sony that began in early 1988, the two companies worked to create a CD-ROM version of the SNES. Though Nintendo denied the existence of the Sony deal as late as March 1991, at the Consumer Electronics Show in June 1991, Sony revealed a Super Famicom with a built-in CD-ROM drive that incorporated Green Book technology, or CDI, called the Play Space Station, also known as the SNES CD. However, a day after the announcement at CES, Nintendo announced that it would be breaking its partnership with Sony, opting to go with Philips instead to using the same technology. The deal was broken by Nintendo after they were unable to come to an agreement on how revenue would be split between the two companies. The breaking of the partnership infuriated Sony president Nori Oga, who responded by appointing Karugi with the responsibility of developing a PlayStation, one-word, project to rival the Nintendo. So all the people who are always like PlayStation diehards just know that you wouldn't exist without Nintendo.
Yeah.
Now I'm just thinking of the astronaut memes. What do you mean it's all Nintendo? It always has been.
Nintendo all the way down.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's our little brief history of Nintendo. Granted, there's some really deep parts that you could probably dive into if you really wanted to. So yeah, I guess this leads to our final thoughts. So Michael, what's any final thoughts on the history of Nintendo now that we've kind of flown through it?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm always really interested in the early history stuff and, finding out what the companies were like.
Yeah.
Before they started doing this stuff. What I did find funny actually is you can still buy Hanafuda decks from Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they make a ton of different varieties, but I do know if you go online, there is an official Mario themed Hanafuda deck that you can buy on their website for $25.
Yeah, and I know with the release of the new Nintendo Museum, which is apparently built on the location of the original Hanafuda factory.
Mm-hmm. I saw that video.
Yeah, it was really interesting watching that and showing them displaying basically everything they've ever made, except for the Love Hotel.
Yeah, I do think it's funny. I do think it's cool that Nintendo has a lot of pride in their history, and they seem to have done a lot of work to really kind of document the kind of transformation that their company has been through since its inception, and kind of over the years has led them to where they are today. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Microsoft or Sony has a similar attitude, but I appreciate Nintendo when they're not suing small companies.
Yeah, or banning YouTube videos or Twitch streams.
Yeah.
So
just remember, Nintendo, you guys got lucky. Lego could have ended your business back in the 70s.
That's right.
So
Nintendo.
next time you think about suing somebody, just think,
it's fine.
Okay.
A small podcast will make sure to keep them in check.
Yeah.
At least until they send us a cease and desist or something.
Yeah.
So
Shigeru Miyamoto is listening to us at this very second.
Mm-hmm. And if he's listening to us, you can totally be a guest on our show if you want, and just make sure you.
I withdraw everything I said.
Yeah, and make sure while you're at it, just if you haven't been friends with Kojima, we'd like to talk to him too.
Yeah.
If he's not
Love
too
that
busy,
guy.
like making some weird game. So
He probably is. But
yeah, he probably is. So okay. So this kind of wraps up our Nintendo episode. This episode should be out pretty soon, and there should be a follow-up episode within the next few weeks after that. Hopefully we have our annual obligatory award show where we will talk about games we've played throughout the years. We're gonna talk, there's been one like big topic that we've been sitting on all year that we're actually finally going to get to talk about, which is some of the state of the video game industry in 2024. I think Michael and I both have some choice words about the state of gaming this year. And not to mention, we're probably going to put this out after the Game Awards because we have to point and laugh at them.
that's true.
So yeah.
When Shadow of the Earth Tree inevitably wins Game of the Year.
Yeah, and we're just going to sit here and just be like, well, can't be mad, but damn.
Yeah.
You get to talk about how many people get snubbed and how many times we're going to see people get their speeches like cut in half.
I hope they don't do that shit this year.
Yeah, same.
I think it's a mockery of the industry that our version of the Oscars and the Grammys is more of a publicity event than it is actually a ceremony to celebrate an art form.
Yeah.
I thought it was so disrespectful them trying to get the voice actor for Kratos off the stage.
Yeah, they did. They tried to play him off, and he was like,
Right.
nope. And like just random other companies that just were like, here's an award off to the side. Don't even get a chance to like give a speech or anything.
Yeah. Honestly, like, I don't know. I like announcements. I really do. Like, gaming news is always cool and exciting.
Mhm.
But I just, we need to take ourselves more seriously. I think I say we, the gaming industry needs to take itself more seriously.
Yeah.
And the Game Awards really do need to be a kind of moment. Yeah. Imagine watching, the Oscars and they rapid fire announce multiple categories and then show 3 movie trailers.
Yeah, and then like best actor is literally just some guy standing on a side piece being like, somebody won this award, and that's it.
yeah, it's kind of embarrassing.
It is. Like, I understand that they were like trying to be a little bit more controlling after what happened 2 years ago when that guy got up on stage.
Yeah, that's true.
But also, like, you need to give, like, the show literally is online only. Like, it's not like you don't have as much time as you want. So,
Right.
So, okay. Well, we'll do our plugs and we're going to wrap things up. So, Michael, where can the folks find you lifting weights?
Mackerel_prawns on Instagram is basically where I'm still the most active.
Yeah, you can also see random pictures of him looking like he's trying out to be the front lead guitarist for a Creed cover band.
Yeah. One day. That's the goal.
Yeah.
I did hit I got a 315 squat today, which is something I've been working towards for a while. So that's cool.
Hell yeah, man. You're a machine that intakes lean beef and exports gains.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
and y'all can find me on my Twitch for twitch.tv/backwards hero. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook for my art stuff, Press Art F4. My book is out now, so there's not a way to order it online because I'm lazy, but that will be coming at some point. You can also find us with our link tree with linktr.ee/instruction booklet. We have officially left Twitter. I said, fuck that place. And we now have a Blue Sky account. So,
Yep.
So, go check us out there. Follow us there. I will post whenever we do stuff. Y'all can watch me randomly stream really Nintendo games and be completely bad at it. Or other things. Who knows? Also, thanks out to the AYCH network for, helping us out and letting us do this show and letting us kind of just do our own thing. And they don't come for us. You can catch them on with their YouTube, where all of our episodes are up on there. They're now moving to some new formats. I think they have an Elden Ring stream coming up. So yeah. Other than that, so yeah, tune in maybe in a couple of weeks, and we'll have our award show out. You can hear us talk for like an hour and a half about how we feel about games and games that we've played this year, or games that we played this year that didn't come out this year, or other categories that I haven't even come up with yet. But it is the best award show around.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we will talk to y'all later. Have a good one.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.